Nowhere to Hide. I don't know if you've heard about those heartless Republicans and those poor starving children, but it's true. Conservative legislators did kill a particular emergency benefits transfer. It's a food stamps kind of program, a summer program for kids. And though you may have heard some weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth about the poor, starving kids who are at risk because of these heartless legislators, maybe you should consider the other side of the story as far as fiscal responsibility when it comes to doing right by the taxpayers. I've got the details coming up.
Press club or bias all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. My name is Brian Hyde, and I'm here to provide just a little bit of clarity. You don't have to agree with everything I say. You don't have to agree with anything that I say, but I'd like to offer some clarity on some of the issues that we face here in Idaho, particularly issues that, can I say, are not well reported by our legacy media. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about those poor, starving kids. Specifically, this is a piece from Nicholas Kleinworth from the Idaho Freedom Foundation. Stopping yet another welfare program won't starve children. Now, this is a very predictable thing. Anytime a program comes along and think of the children can be uttered, to justify its existence, it's presumed that only a really heartless person would say no to such a thing, especially if it purportedly is there to help children. And this summer program, which is there to supplement kids who may be on reduced school lunches or free school lunches, it's seen as, look, this is a very compassionate way of the government being there to help them in their moment of need. And don't you know, people are struggling. And well, yes, we're quite aware that people are struggling, but nobody ever stops to ask, does government ever play a role in why everything is so expensive or why so many families are struggling? So I leave it to Nicholas to help spell out the reasons why this was the right thing to do to kill this particular bill. And no, it does not leave children at risk. He explains it beautifully. Nicholas tells us near the end of the 2024 legislative session, lawmakers considered some of the most controversial budget bills of the year, including Senate Bill 1445, the budget for the Department of Health and Welfare's Division of Welfare. Now, this legislation contained a line item of just over $1 million for giving summer food stamps to school-aged children. And Nicholas tells us this dollar amount is deceptive, as it would unlock a cascade of more than $17.5 million in permanent federal spending on this welfare benefit. Now, again, those who would say, well, isn't that money coming from the federal government? That's not out of our pockets. Think again. You may not feel it directly, as in you didn't write a check yourself, but the money is taken from taxpayers. That includes you and every other productive citizen. Now, if you're not a productive citizen, well, then rest easy. Maybe you have nothing to worry about. Anyway, Nicholas tells us the summer EBT program started as an initiative called the Pandemic EBT Program, and it was designed to mitigate any food insecurity that resulted from government actions to shut down schools and large parts of the economy. Well, with the pandemic long behind us, it's only proper for this program to end as the funding dries up. But state and federal bureaucrats tried to make this program a permanent burden on Idaho taxpayers. But he says this burden was expected to grow far beyond its stated purpose of simply feeding the needy. Nicholas tells us that this particular program, ordinarily children would qualify for it if they're also eligible for free and reduced price lunch or food stamps. But now new federal rules significantly broaden this eligibility criteria. If just 25% of the students at a school qualify for the program, well, good news, then the benefits would apply to all students at that school, regardless of their family income or eligibility. See how that works? This is called community eligibility. So this program was more than just a way to feed the needy. It looked like the beginnings of a universal basic income entitlement. And that scheme would put as many of Idaho's youth on welfare as possible, making them dependent on the government to serve their basic needs. Now, I get it. People want to say, well, we want to know that the money's going to be there. But if you're creating learned dependency, you are not doing them a favor in the long run. Now, of course, on the leftists cried foul after conservatives rejected this new entitlement program, many claiming children will starve without it. But Nicholas says this is untrue. The summer EBT program would merely have duplicated other government food service programs. Do you get that? The Department of Redundancy Department would even shake its head at this. Idaho already has programs like the Summer Food Service Program and others to provide subsidized school lunches, and those are on top of regular food stamps or free or reduced price lunch. Most students who would qualify under the expanded program are already eligible for those. So this summer EBT program would merely have given additional money to those receiving funds through the existing programs. Do you understand how that works? This is growing government, not so much as taking care of kids. And Nicholas points out the name of the game is dependency. In this case, the case of summer EBT, rather, the dependency is twofold. First, implementing this program would further the leftist dream of cradle-to-grave welfare. The program would have only hooked Idaho's youth on government handouts. A community eligibility approach teaches them that even people who can feed themselves should be looking to the government and the political process for their sustenance. Now, you can understand how that translates into who's your daddy? Who's giving you the benefits? It's a way to buy votes. And when we do find people in need, Nicholas reminds us it's time we look beyond the government and to the community to offer them support. And by the way, he's not wrong here. Think of all the different institutions besides government that operate within a healthy society. Community, church, business, family, media. These are just a few. Academia could be another one. Countless nonprofit and church programs can ensure that children and families are adequately fed, especially those who are in a position where they cannot feed themselves. So that's one side of the dependency that is being created through such programs. But there's another side, and this is one that's often overlooked. Nicholas tells us a second form of dependence comes through the way the summer EBT program is financed. Federal funds for the most part. But with this money comes strings that force otherwise conservative states to bend to the will of leftists in Washington, D.C. Now, look, the Biden administration already has a history of leveraging school lunch funding to strong-arm Idaho into adopting these Biden administration's harmful transgender bathroom and sports policies. More money only strengthens that federal control because it all comes with strings attached. And the irony of the whole program is that it hurts the very people it purports to help. Making this program permanent only perpetuates the exorbitant government spending that drove inflation so high that some Americans can no longer afford to feed their children for the summer. And these same families and future generations of Idahoans will foot the bill for this expansion of government. And I mean, it's a truism that when government gets involved and creates a program, it doesn't matter how well intentioned. The end result often is that program will continue to grow. Someone has to pay for it. And more often than not, there's a fair amount of mission creep in which suddenly if a little bit of this is good, well, a lot of it must be better. And politicians and bureaucrats find that there's job security, not in solving a problem, but in making sure that it's never solved. Now, this brings us to another point, and that is, but aren't these people really concerned about the kids? I would like to think so, but I'm not so sure. And here's why. Because when it comes to Marxism, and when it comes to, and yes, I'm using that term decidedly because this is classic Marxist. Well, if the whole collective can come together and everybody is equally taking care of one another, from each according to his need, to each according to his ability, blah 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 blah. Actually, that's the other way around. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. But it's the same principle, and that is someone has to plan centrally. Someone has to make sure that all of these things are planned out in advance. There's no possibility about solving this at the lowest possible level, which brings us to the point that you cannot have a good faith conversation when there's not honesty at the base of it. And so here is a rule of thumb that I would encourage you to keep in mind, and that is Marxists just lie. And they lie so overtly and so blatantly that people begin to question their own perceptions. And it works because nobody expects someone to lie so overtly. The point is, the people who would defend programs like this or defend the defunding of programs or stripping of programs like this out of the budget, they're not dealing with you honestly. They don't believe in shared truth. Well, you're starving children. They're using words as weapons. And until you learn to keep this in mind during every interaction, you will continue to get played. Because they rely on you implicitly assuming that they have good intentions. They're aiming at shared truth so dialogue can be productive. But the truth is that's deceptive. For Marxists, dialogue is not a way of attaining truth. It's just a forum for manipulation. Think about that the next time you hear someone talking about those poor, starving children. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Press club or bias, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.